When we come in contact with suffering, our religion gets deeper. It goes to a deeper level. And even in the 4 months since I have arrived, there are a lot of families in this parish that have been plunged into suffering. Some of them are here now. I'm thinking especially of people who've lost loved ones since I've been here. I'm thinking of people like the Blosser family, the Conlons, the O'Neills, the Coglins, the Lentos, the Lennons, and others who have lost a loved one. And they carry that loss and that suffering and that disorientation with them everywhere they go. And they brought it here today. And I can guarantee you that when you go through something like they've been through, or that you've been through, you don't hear this passion the same way anymore. This passion means something very different to you after you've entered into your own suffering. A lot of people experience our religion differently. And maybe the reason for that is that what motivates us to come here is different. It's been said that some people come to religion because they're afraid of hell. And other people come to religion because they've been through hell. Some come here because they're afraid of hell. Others come here because they've been through hell. And that second reason is going to take you to a much deeper level. Coming here because we're afraid of hell is not the best reason to be here. Coming here because we've suffered and we now have entered into the mystery of the cross and we want to make sense of it. We want to find our way to the resurrection. That is a good reason to be here. That's going to be a much deeper faith. A lot of people notice that Catholics are a little more into the suffering of Jesus than other Christian denominations. You may have noticed that. And one of the ways that you can tell that right away when you come into a church is that when you walk into most Christian churches, you'll see a cross. But when you walk into a Catholic church, you see a crucifix with Jesus hanging on the cross. Barbara Semix is a name that many of you either know or are learning. She's the woman who, a week from right now, will be a Catholic. She's joining the church and being confirmed at the Easter Vigil, right here in this church. And she's lived in Coxsackie for 23 years. And she's always been a churchgoer. But an amazing story brought her to us. She retired and started volunteering every Monday and every Friday at the Pines, and she met a woman there named Annalise Blosser. Sadly, Annalise Blosser died this winter, and she was buried from our church. And when Barbara Semix walked in our church and saw this crucifix, she had a moment. She looked at Jesus on the cross and said, "That's my precious Savior up there." And she said the peace that she felt walking into this church was something she'd never felt before. And she hasn't been able to stay away since. It was connecting with that suffering on the day of a funeral of a woman that she loved that helped her to know that this was home. And you know, a lot of priests, when they celebrate Mass, will have a crucifix right there on the altar to look at. You'll often notice that during the Eucharist, I'll turn and look at the crucifix because it's important to remember where this came from. This was purchased for us at a high price, and it's important to remember it in the moment that we're celebrating it. None of us likes suffering, but we can't avoid it. A lot of us try to run from it, but you can never outrun suffering. I was talking to a woman recently who lost a family member, a woman who was in her 40s, to cancer, and she left behind a husband and children. It was about a month ago that she died, and the husband in the past couple of weeks has begun acting strangely. When the kids cry, he tells them, "It's time to stop crying. We've got to be strong." And he put a profile of himself up on Match.com, looking to date. And this woman was so upset, so heartbroken that this would happen. And you can understand that. But you know what he's doing, don't you? He's running from the suffering. He can't take it. He can't face it. It's too much. And so he wants to pretend it's something that he can move beyond quickly. But we can't do that. Suffering is something that we can't avoid. Maybe when we get to heaven, we'll understand why suffering is part of this plan. But for a lot of people, it's the reason they lose their faith. They think, how could God be good and have us suffer this much? But you know, one little glimpse into maybe why suffering is important. Jesus did so much good in his life. He fed hungry people. He healed the sick. He forgave people's sins. Over and over he did that. And all of that got people's attention. But nothing mattered as much as the 3 hours he spent hanging on that cross. People wear crosses and crucifixes around their neck. They don't wear images of Jesus blessing or feeding or forgiving. Not because those things aren't important, but because nothing showed us better how deep his love was than the 3 hours he spent suffering for us. It's what allows us to know that there is nothing that will stop God from loving us. Nothing. And God will not be limited in showing it to us. Jesus would undergo anything, literally, to love us. Some of you might remember that song from Meatloaf that was popular in the 70s. I would do anything for love, but I won't do that. Jesus would never sing that song. That is not the song of Jesus. He would do anything for love. Anything. Period. A lot of people nowadays have tattoos. I don't, but I'll bet there's people here that do. And a lot of people get tattoos to commemorate an important relationship in their life. A husband will get his wife's name tattooed on his bicep, or the wife might get a tattoo of their anniversary date. A lot of times you'll notice people will get a tattoo when someone they love dies. And I think the reason they do that is actually two parts. I think there's two reasons. I think one of the reasons they do it is because getting a tattoo hurts. It hurts. If somebody has a tattoo, you know they went through something for it. And it's permanent. It's not going to go away. It's an incredible statement. 2 years ago, a friend of mine named Tom died, and he was such a good man and was such a great mentor, especially to young people who were lost. And one of the ones that he spent the most attention on was a neighbor who was in his early 20s, was kind of floundering in life, and Tom took a lot of time and attention with him. And then Tom died suddenly. And that kid went out the next day and got Tom's name tattooed on his forearm. And I think he did it for two reasons. I think he did it because it hurt. And he did it because it was permanent. And he wanted something to embody how he was feeling. He was hurting, and he loved this man. And he wanted something that hurt and was permanent. Have you ever realized that God has a tattoo of you? God has a tattoo of you and of me. And God received it on the cross because it hurt and it was permanent. It was God's way of saying, this is how much I love you. I love you this much. If you want to know how much I love you, know that I would rather die than live without you. I love you so much. This is how much